Good morning, everybody. My name is Dalton Reynolds-Black, and I am extremely happy to be here presenting during CommWeek. My name of my presentation is Selling a Mission, and we will go ahead and get started. So I wanted to first give a little bit of information about me. So I graduated from the Elliott School in 2014 with integrated marketing communications as my emphasis. During my last year at Wichita State, I got an internship at KMUW, Wichita Public Radio. KMUW carries NPR, National Public Radio, and it is actually licensed through Wichita State. So I don't know if many people know that Wichita State actually has a public radio station, but it is very good station. There's about 5 public radio stations covering the state of Kansas, and I'd say KMUW is one of the top-notch stations in Kansas. Anyway, I started as a development intern, which really was working the front desk, answering the phone, and really just kind of doing anything that needed to be done. After I graduated in 2014, I was having a really hard time finding a job. So at KMUW, I just started asking what tasks I could take on. And that kind of led me into a full-time position in the engagement department. And I will talk a little bit more about that, as well as being an on-air host. It was kind of a direction I didn't think that I would take after getting my degree, but it was really cool, and I was really lucky to be able to stay on there. I was with KMUW until about 3 months ago, and I accepted a position at Harvey County United Way, and I will talk more about that here in a little bit as well. So some more information about KMUW. It's a nonprofit radio station covering local issues, national issues. It's free to listen, and it's licensed through Wichita State. So being a nonprofit radio station, we raised money from our listeners in order to keep ourselves on the air. And KMUW is really unique as a nonprofit in that the donors are also the users of the service. So typically with the nonprofit, you have the people that you're serving with your programs, and then you have the donors who are supporting that, but those people are not necessarily the ones using the programs. With KMUW, we had the benefit of the people that were using, they're listening every day. We're also the ones that were able to donate to the station. Something that was also unique about KMUW when it comes to nonprofits is that we have the radio. I think one of the biggest problems that nonprofits have is like, how do you get your word out? Nonprofits don't want to spend a lot of money on things that aren't their programs that they're offering to the community. So luckily KMUW, we had airtime, and while the airtime does cost money, we were able to use this as an in-kind trade service in exchange for other in-kind trade goods. We were able to put our fundraising messages out there and ask our listeners directly, the people that are using and listening, ask them to put forth money to support it. One of the ways we really used the radio to help with those in-kind services, like if we wanted to do an event at Roxy's downtown, instead of them charging us, the $1,000 or so it would be to rent the space, we could exchange our airtime for, promoting their brand or promoting a particular show that they're putting on. So KMUW had a lot of advantages as a nonprofit that other nonprofits don't have. I have on the screen there kind of a breakdown of where our support comes from. So from over 60%, over half of the support for KMUW came from our listeners. And you can see that, our smallest portion are state grants and our CPB, which is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So really, we relied very heavily on our listeners to support the station. So in 2014, not only did I start on this full time, but we also had a new general manager start at the station. And one of her goals was to become more than just a radio station. We needed people to be invested and connected for us to do more than just through our airwaves. This is when she started the community engagement department, which is where I started full time. This department was in charge of creating content and engagement opportunities for listeners in real life. So taking our content off the air and into the real world. Additionally, she wanted to do a big push to increase local and statewide news coverage. So we hired a number of reporters as well. I think right now there's 7 or 8 local reporters covering anything from, energy and environment, education, the county, just a variety of things. And in addition to that, we also started with the other 5 public radio stations, the Kansas News Service. So this service was a way to share content from HPPR, which is out in Western Kansas. We wanted to be able to exchange content so that our listeners could also know what was going on in Western Kansas or in the Kansas City area, and vice versa. They could find out what was going on in Topeka and Wichita out in Western Kansas. So one of the first ways we pushed ourselves off the air was through this event called Engage ICT Democracy on Tap. This monthly event series started in 2016. So we had a couple years of planning and kind of figuring out how we would do this. But these events are free and they bring together a panel of experts to discuss topics that touch our daily lives. And it's followed by a Q&A with the audience. Some of the topics have included, obviously, COVID-19 recently, but in the past, Medicaid expansion, vaccinations, and a whole lot of other stuff. Since COVID, we were forced to go digital with it. So I think Sarah Jane Crespo is the director of community engagement, has done a really good job of transitioning this event that was a live event into a digital event. This was one of the first steps we took in broadening our services to the community. The event lined very closely to our mission and provided us an opportunity to hear more about what our listeners in the community care about. Through the Q&A process, we were able to pinpoint certain things within each topic that were of particular interest to folks, and this kind of helped us drive what our news reporters were looking to cover. The first year that we put this on, it was funded through a Knight Foundation grant, but then after that, it was up to us to continue to support it. So it was really nice to have that first year fully funded so that we could get it off the ground and see what kind of traction that it would get. And it's turned into, a really successful series where, in the 4th year at this point, and they're usually always held at Roxy's downtown, and people really enjoy coming out and having, some light appetizers and a drink or two while they listen to these topics being discussed in detail. Okay, the next thing we did was maybe a little unconventional, something you might not think a radio station would do, but we created the KMUW street team. It actually started in 2013, but it was fairly small, just a few people. But this idea came from a service we offer called media sponsorships. So media sponsorships, a nonprofit organization could request to have KMUW media sponsor their event. So that means that we would give them a certain number of promotions for their event on air. And then in return, say it's a concert put on by friends. In exchange for that airtime, they'd give us 10 tickets to use how we wanted. And we use those tickets as stewardship things for our donors. So say we have a few high-level donors that are really into the arts. So we'd offer them tickets to the Nutcracker at Friends, and we would sponsor that on air. So we decided to see if we could do this with local races. So in exchange for the promotion, we would get registrations for the run. This was great because it was a new way to engage our listeners, but it was also a really good marketing opportunity for us. You can see they're all wearing branded shirts, and that was part of the agreement. In joining the team, you get this free run, but you have to wear our jersey. And it's very cool because we have runners of all speeds. So we'd have runners that were getting first and second and third, but we'd also have walkers that were in the back of the race. And so we were represented throughout the entire race, and everyone really enjoyed having those free races that they could take part in and represent KMUW. So one of my first jobs in the community engagement department, one of my tasks was to coordinate this team. So I took over the team in 2015. It had just 20 folks on the team. In 2016, when we opened the application again, we received 40 applications. So obviously we were getting noticed in the running community by doing this. I couldn't say no to any of those people that applied in 2016, so our team doubled to 40. And then in 2017, we received over 100 applications. So really, our runners were also speaking highly of this group and made other people want to join, and it was clearly growing very fast. Again, I couldn't say no to anybody, so we ended up having 100 people on the team in 2017, and it's just continued to grow since then. This group was really a good opportunity for us to foster relationships with these folks and promote our programming to a new group, because I noticed by 2017, some of our runners were not as familiar with KMUW as the people that have been running since 2013, 2014. So I'll get into a little bit more about why I think that's important here in a second. But I actually ran on the team myself when I was on the group, running the group. And I'll never forget this one race. I was having a really bad run, and it was a 10K, which I think is the worst distance to run a race because it's short enough that people sprint, but it's long enough that I couldn't sprint it. But anyways, I remember somebody coming up behind me and tapping me on the shoulder while I'm running and saying, "What is KMUW? I've seen it around." And so me, not able to breathe, I'm trying to talk about the station and our programming and the street team and what it does and what it does for the station. So I think that also illustrates kind of how these outreach efforts like the street team, which you might not think of a public radio station having a running team, but how this group really helped us get out into the community. So I think that the street team is a great example of what we call the engagement pipeline. So that's how people come in and how they become fans of the station. So a lot of people like me find the station on their own and start listening, engaging with the station with no prompt other than they just happened to stumble upon it, or their parents were listeners, or whatever the case may be. But then we have people that aren't as familiar. So we would capture them with this opportunity to run in the races for free. But then we got to start to build a relationship with them and promote our programming with them and ask them to volunteer in a different way, whether that's coming to answer the phones during our fund drives or whatever. So we start to build a stronger relationship with them, with the hope that they would then start to use our product and then support the product. So anyways, it was it's been a really successful way of engaging people who weren't as familiar with KMUW that have now become listeners and donors and volunteers to the station. Another way that we kind of reached out into the community was our literary feast. So we had a number of other engagement activities that were more engaging for current listeners. Sometimes it's not all about just getting a new listener or a new donor. Sometimes it's about building that relationship and that rapport with your current people so that they continue to support the station. Events like the Literary Feast are used as opportunities to engage with our current donors and listeners. This monthly club was created as a way to bring folks together and do something fun. It's hosted by a few staff members, and it's exactly what you'd think of a book club. A group of people get together at KMUW studios and discuss a book each month, and food is provided from Public at the Brickyard, and it's a really fun evening. It's a great conversation starter and just another thing people get to say, I do this with KMUW. We had some ties to some programming with this, and I'll kind of get into that more with the podcasting, but we had a segment called Marginalia that was done by Beth Golay, and a lot of times she would interview authors of Literary Feast books ahead of time, and those would air on the station and be available on our website ahead of the event, and was just another fun way to do a little bit more with our donors and listeners. In addition to getting out in the community and being more than a radio station, we also wanted to reach new audiences. So we kind of did that with the street team. Our community engagement efforts were kind of twofold in a lot of ways. We were providing more to our listeners than just what they hear on the radio, but we were also helping to reach new audiences like with the street team. But our actual product, our audio, what could we do in that realm to reach new audiences? Is radio as popular as in the past? Are people sitting at home listening to the radio while they cook Thanksgiving dinner, or are they watching TV more? Or are people listening to radio differently, like on their devices with their earbuds in? So these were all questions we were asking ourselves and trying to figure out how to bring radio, which may be seen as an older medium, into the new age. So in an effort to reach younger folks, I held a few rounds of focus groups a couple years ago. Participants were asked to join because of their connection to the station. So maybe we knew them through the street team, or that they'd come into the station and donated, or maybe we saw them at an Engage ICT Democracy on Tap event. I also asked staff members to reach out into the community for young people that I didn't know. So we were trying to get really a big scope of people. One of the things that we learned and kind of already had suspected was that more people are listening to content just like KMUW and just like NPR's, but doing it through podcasts. We were already creating some of our own content through local commentaries, so we decided to make some of them into longer form podcasts. I just wanted to point out a few. Marginalia is the one that I just discussed before. It's really cool. Beth Golay does an awesome job with those. And like I said, often she would do interviews with authors of the books that were being read for Literary Feast. Hindsight is a new one this year, and I highly recommend listening to it if you haven't yet. It's produced by Dr. Robin Henry from WSU. This was to mark the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. So it was really relevant this year as we hit the 100-year anniversary. So if you haven't listened to it, listen to it. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. And the last podcast I wanted to point out is one of my favorites. It's called You're Saying It Wrong. It's all about words that we use wrong. Like, for instance, I was thinking of one from one of the very first episodes. The phrase chomping at the bit is not right. And I think a lot of people just use that because that's what they think that they've heard. But the actual phrase is champing at the bit, because champing means to chew anxiously at the bit. Like, think of a racehorse champing at the bit. So I just wanted to point out those three because I think that they're really cool. And I highly suggest listening to them if you haven't yet. And then one of the last ways that we tried to reach out to more people was through our app. This was a way for us to put radio station right in people's back pocket. They could re-listen to things that they missed or tune in just for their favorite programs. You can see in the screen grab, there's a spot right there for Marginal. You can just click on it and listen to the latest episode. At this point, when we developed the app, I had moved out of the engagement department into the director of membership department, which I'll talk a little bit more here in a second. But as the director of membership, one of my favorite features of the apps was being able to send push notifications to people. Obviously, we could do that for our content that was being created. But also during fundraising times, we had the opportunity to send out strategic messages about donating to the station, which I think was a good benefit for us to have. So fundraising. I spent a couple years in the community engagement department, and then I transitioned into the fundraising side of nonprofit work and in the radio station, and became director of membership in 2017. So I was in charge of a set of fundraising that we had to do at the station. There are a number of parts of fundraising. There's the individuals, which was kind of my main thing, but there are two parts when it comes to individuals. The first part is what we call annual giving, which is what I was in charge of. Annual giving consists of a large pool of donors who give various amounts. Some of our donors could give like $25, while others could give, $500. Usually I was dealing with upwards of 3,000 donors who gave through annual giving. Within annual giving, we have a lot of different efforts to raise that money. One of the strongest efforts was trying to convert our annual givers from just giving one-time donations. So like in the fall, somebody gives $240 every fall. That's just what they do. We tried to do a big push to move more people to sustaining monthly donors, which is it's a draw for people because you never have to worry about whether you've donated this year. And usually we see that people could give more through giving monthly than they could at one time. So they may be able to afford $240 in the fall, but they maybe could do $30 a month, and then in a year's time they've given $360. So this was a big push for us, and right before I left, we were just over 50% of our donors being monthly donors. So that's a really good effort on our part. And the second part of individuals, fundraising with individuals, is what we call major giving. And those donors were handled by a director of major giving, and I didn't have anything to do with them. But we had about 100 donors in this group, and it was made up of people who gave $1,000 or more in a year. These gifts were built through relationship building with the donor and our director of major gifts. $1,000 may not seem like a huge difference, but when you start losing some of those 100 people, that's a lot of money that you're losing. So major giving really depends heavily on that personal one-on-one relationship that our major gifts director had with those donors. So we'll get a little bit more into the fundraising here. One of my main things was our direct mail campaign. So we would hold 3 on-air fundraisers a year, and ahead of those fundraisers, we'd send direct mail to current donors and past donors. So somebody that maybe gave a couple years ago but hasn't given again, we would send them a letter to try to encourage them to donate again. These letters were a 2-mailer cycle, so we would send the first mailer about 6 to 8 weeks before our on-air pledge drive. We were encouraging people to give early so that our on-air pledge drive would be shorter or less intrusive. And then 2 to 3 weeks before we went on air, we'd send a second mail piece to the people who had not responded to the first one to try to get them to donate. One of our big elements of these pledge drives and these direct mail campaigns were our incentives to give. So every drive we would select a local artist, a Wichita artist, to design a piece or let us use a piece of their artwork on our thank you gifts. So for instance, at $60, if you give $60 to KMUW, in return, you'd receive a mug, and it would feature that local art on there. We also did t-shirts and stuff like that. So those became super, super popular. We'd have people that collected those mugs because they featured local artwork on them. And they're super cool. I should have put a picture on here, but I didn't. So go to KMUW's website and check out a picture of the mug, because the last one was very cool, done by Kamala Eaton. Yeah. And lastly, in these direct mail campaigns, we would do community partnerships. So it was just another way to incentivize giving from our donors. We would choose another nonprofit, and then they would find a donor to help support them. And so then in our letter, we would encourage people to support KMUW, and when they did, such and such company would support this other nonprofit. So it was doing 2 good things with 1 donation. And people really, really liked that. We tried one year to go away from it to just see what would happen, and we did not have as much response to our direct mail as we had in previous years. And when we brought it back again, we saw an increase in what that direct mail piece was able to bring in. So we decided to keep those. Let me get back to where I was here. So our pledge drive, like I said, the direct mail piece was mailed out 6 to 8 weeks and 2 to 3 weeks before. So when we actually got to the on-air portion of our pledge drive, it was about 7 days on air. And during these 7 days, we interrupt programming several times a day for like 2 to 9 minutes each time, and like 3 to 4 times per hour. It's interesting. I never really did the on-air pitching, as we called it. During pledge drive, I was more processing the donations, but it's an interesting craft. So you would start by making a case as to why to give to KMUW. You listen to the content every day. You depend on the quality news that is delivered to you through our newscast, those kind of things. The things that draw them to the radio station, that is the case for why they should donate. But just making the case is not enough to actually get a donation. It's also very important to tell them how to give. So go online to kmuw.org and click the donate button, or call us and one of our wonderful volunteers will help you with your donation. Those kind of things are really important to this pitch because you never want to assume that somebody listening knows how to donate. It's really easy when we have a lot of recurring donors to think, oh, we can just say, we're here again, donate, and that's enough. But you get new listeners every day, every month, and you have to tell those people and handhold them through their first donation. And then the last part of this pitch is the close. And I think one thing that's really important to note about this kind of ask is you have to directly ask. You can't say, we depend on your support. People know that. That's our main thing. It's important to close it with, please make a donation right now at kmuw.org or calling us. Those direct asks, I think sometimes can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it is really important to this kind of fundraising is to be very direct and very transparent and make a direct ask. Okay. So Harvey County United Way. Like I said, I started at the United Way in September, and I really loved my job at KMUW, and I loved the radio station, and I'm still a listener. But that was the only professional work that I had done, and I was really getting to a point where I was ready for my next thing, so to speak. And I was really interested in major gift fundraising, but KMUW, like I said, already had somebody in that role. So my real option to get that experience and take my job to the next level was to leave. And it was a super difficult decision because, like I said, I do love KMUW, but it was about taking my next step in my career. I applied and interviewed for jobs for close to a year and was not able to really find something that I liked. Some of them I got really far in the process, but it came down to me not having that major gift fundraising experience. And so that's why I didn't get the job. And then there were other ones where I was offered the job and I just really didn't feel comfortable. It didn't seem like something that I would enjoy after doing the interview process, or, there was more traveling involved than I was prepared to do. So there were several jobs that I actually turned down myself. It's kind of crazy with the United Way because the position is executive director, and I applied kind of on a whim thinking, I don't know that I have the experience for executive director, but it's a smaller organization. Some of these things that are listed on the job description are my expertise. So I went ahead and applied. But throughout my year-long process of looking for a job and not getting some of the jobs that I was really excited about, I decided that if I couldn't get this experience at KMUW, I needed to branch out a little bit and get some experience in other ways. So I was a member of this organization called the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And so I ran for a board position as their communications chair, and I started handling social media and some of the marketing for that organization, which is not what I was doing in KMUW. And then I joined another board called Glisson, Kansas, and I served on the development committee. So I was doing some strategic planning when it came to donors and stuff like that. And I really think doing some of that volunteer work and getting experience that way is what helped me get this job at United Way. And it's very different than my job at KMUW. I am at United Way. I am the only employee. I report to a 15-member board. And in addition to fundraising, I'm also in charge of our community partnerships, our marketing and public relations, and all of the other administrative tasks like accounts receivable and accounts payable. So it's a big change, and I really had to relearn how to prioritize my time. because I had been so focused on just fundraising, and now I'm in charge of the full operation. So fundraising at United Way is a little bit different than what I did at KMUW, but I think that United Way figured out the key to fundraising a long time ago and built their whole model around it, which is monthly giving, which we kind of started doing that at KMUW. But that is the majority of what United Ways across the world do. So we do workplace campaigns within businesses in Harvey County. So our annual campaign runs from fall until the start of the new year. So we are in campaign right now. So during this time, I'm setting up meetings with companies, and I'll go in and I'll present to the staff about why giving back to the community is important. And then those companies, through a partnership, will make a donation. The employees will give out of their check each, every 2 weeks, a small amount, and then that check will come from the company. So it's the backbone of what Harvey County United Way is able to do because of these programs. The other part of Harvey County United Way's fundraising is our residential campaign, which is pretty similar to what I was doing at KMUW. This annual campaign is a direct mail piece asking for donations from folks, as well as people who've retired from companies that had workplace campaigns. So say somebody's been with an organization for 20 years and is given to United Way through their company for that long. We don't want to just lose them because they hit retirement age. So this residential campaign is a way for us to keep them in the fold and keep them giving to the organization that they've been giving to for so long. And this campaign, the residential campaign, is also how we identify our major donors. So often that's how we get those $1,000 gifts. And then that gives me an opportunity then to write thank you notes and set up a, call to talk to them and thank them again. Within my first couple of months at United Way, I've reached out to our major donors at least a couple of times. The first one was just to introduce myself as the new director. And then the second time was to ask them to meet me so I could learn more about them. Obviously, we haven't done that because COVID numbers are on the rise. So I kind of put that to a stop, but hopefully soon I'll be able to get back to fostering those relationships with those donors. So the last couple things I just wanted to go over about United Way was a marketing campaign that I'm doing. And I'll preface this by saying I did not study graphic design or anything at Wichita State. So my knowledge here is really basic, but luckily United Way Worldwide helps with some images and stuff and some branding guidelines that have helped me put together a couple ads. But this I just wanted to show was our Fight campaign, which I just launched last week. The Fight campaigns, these ads are in black and white, as you can see, and it features one of our focus areas that need change. The focus areas in these two are education on the left and health on the right. And these are usually tagged with the hashtag join the fight. So it's we're showing the struggles within those focus areas that we're working to make better. And then that hashtag kind of builds community, letting people know that they can join us in supporting and changing the lives of people in our community. The next campaign is the Win campaign. So it's kind of the result of the fight. So obviously these are in color and they show the bright side and show the outcome of the work that we're doing. And then again, they're hashtagged with United We Win. So I just wanted to show you those because this is a new facet for me to be doing in nonprofit, and I'm excited about how these turned out, and I'm excited to see what they do in the community to help our brand. So why nonprofit? When I was at the Elliott School, I never really saw myself going into nonprofit work. I wanted to work in an ad agency and write copy or come up with creative campaigns at some for-profit company in their marketing department. But that internship at KMUW really led me down a different path. And I now looking back, I see that that was kind of where I was always supposed to go, because I read job descriptions for for-profit work, and I'm just like, man, that doesn't sound as fun or as rewarding as nonprofit work does. So I would encourage all of you to consider it if you haven't already. There are basically the same opportunities in nonprofit as there are for-profit companies. You could do marketing manager, you could do fundraiser, which is really using your comm degree, because you're crafting messages of asking for donations rather than crafting messages to sell a product. So nonprofit offers all of those positions. And I think it's really work that you feel good about at the end of the day. For me, I get really excited in the morning about going to work, because I think about how we can move forward and create change in the community, especially in our focus areas at United Way in health, education, and income stability. I get excited helping connect families to those resources that they need that will help them get back on their feet. And I get excited about telling those success stories of people getting the resources that they need to our donors, so that they can see how their money is really being utilized and how they are helping to make that change in Harvey County. Okay, I think the last part is my little Q&A here. And I do see that we have some questions. Let's see here. Okay, Madeline's got a question from Facebook. Can you tell us about the process of coming up with these ideas at KMUW for community engagement or fundraising? Did it start with a group brainstorm, or were those your ideas or some other individual ideas? Were you looking at what other radio stations were doing? What was the process? Yes. So it was kind of a mixture of all of that. Our general manager, Deborah Frazier, came from a larger station in Houston. So they kind of already had been doing some of these things. So that's where her idea to create this department came from. And then it was sort of a brainstorm between Sarah Jane Crespo, which is the director of community engagement, and Deborah. And also, yeah, we looked at other radio stations. I highly recommend not reinventing the wheel. And I think public radio really does a good job at borrowing ideas and tweaking ideas from other stations that we can make work in our own community. Because obviously Houston and Wichita are different, just like Kansas City and Wichita are different. So it takes that local perspective to make it work in your community. But I think seeing some other station do something that's successful and trying to figure out how to make it work in your community is a really great place to start when creating new programs and coming up with those ideas. Okay, I don't see other questions. Oh, here we go. Chase Dempsey from Facebook. How long did you volunteer at KMUW before getting the job? So I didn't volunteer. I was an intern, and I will make a plug for KMUW. They're currently hiring interns, and they are paid intern positions thanks to the Elliott School. So highly recommend checking those out. They have them in the news department and in the community engagement department and the marketing department. So check them out if you haven't already. But I started there as an intern, and I was lucky enough that internship transitioned into full-time work. But it was all about, I was looking for opportunities that I could make myself an asset to the station, because I wasn't finding a job anywhere else, and my internship was coming to a close and I had to do something. So I started looking for opportunities things that I could tell people didn't really particularly like to do. So one of those things would be depositing money. That was a super labor intensive process that took a lot of data entry and hand keying stuff. And so I just asked if I could help with that. Same way with how I transitioned to being an on-air host. Our producers were always looking for people to voice little 30-second things, and I asked, can I help with that? So I would say that that's a piece of advice for you. If you're in an internship and you want to stay there full time, try to make yourself valuable. What can you bring to the table? What areas in the organization do you see needing help, and can you provide that help in a positive way? So that's kind of the long answer to your question. Okay, let's see here. Drew from YouTube. What other community ideas have you guys done to keep the people already there connected? So in addition to like the literary feast and stuff like that, we also, part of the community engagement department was hosting all of our events. So I kind of mentioned how we made a big push to get monthly donors as sustaining members, giving $10 a month, $20 a month, 30, 50, whatever per month amount. And one of the things that we started doing with them was a sustainer only, monthly giver only event. And these would be ahead of our pledge drive. So we would do it a couple month or so before we would do our on-air pledge drive, and we'd invite all of those monthly givers, and we would unveil the art for that pledge drive to them. So it was a way to incentivize them giving that way, because they got to come in and they got to be one of the first people to see the featured artwork, and it was also a chance for them to pick up their mug or their t-shirt. Like I said, those mugs kind of became collector items for people, so it was really important for some people to be there at every one of those sustainer art reveal events, see the art, get the mug. They got a chance to talk to the artist about their piece. So that's just one of the events that we would do, but we do volunteer appreciation events, those major donor events. So kind of based on how people were giving or how they were connected with the station, we would do individual events to keep them engaged as well. Okay, let's see. Maddie Smith from Facebook, has COVID-19 affected people's morale at all where you work? So at KMUW, I don't know that it has affected our morale, but it's definitely changed the way that we work. I should say they work, but we went completely remote very, very early on, mid-March, and stayed that way and are still that way. So that was a big investment for KMUW, because now we had to create studios for our reporters in their houses. So I don't think that it's really changed the morale at all, but it's definitely changed the way that we work, and how we have to be super careful now. You think about coming up to a microphone to do your on-air recording. Before, you didn't really think about who was sitting in front of that mic before, talking into that mic and touching that mouse and editing that audio on that computer. So it definitely changed things in that way. And then at United Way, I'm the only employee, so I haven't really had to change much. I still go into the office except for today, but it's been a difficult time to transition into a new job right in the middle of their fundraising campaign, when I can't see a lot of people just yet. So no morale change, just a challenge for sure. Adriana Young from YouTube. What, in your opinion, is the best way to advertise for events and other activities? Social media, word of mouth, something else? I know for United Way, we rely very heavily on social media because one of our main talking points when we talk to donors is we like to keep everything very local. We like to keep our overhead very small, which is kind of why I am the only paid employee, so that most of the money that comes into United Way is going back into the community to support the individuals who need it. So we do rely heavily on social media to get our word out, as well as sending, emails to folks about events. And kind of the same way with KMUW, their budget is obviously a little bit different, and they can spend money, or they can offer the trade for advertising space in a newspaper or on a billboard. But we do rely heavily on digital, just because I think that is where people get their information anymore. I use a program or a website called later.com. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's really helped me streamline all of my social media platforms, because Facebook obviously has a scheduling function, but Instagram and Twitter are not like that in the same way. So later.com is this site that I use that it helps me schedule things so I can be strategic about when I promote or post stuff on Facebook versus Instagram or Twitter, and so on and so forth. Again, long answer to your question. Maddie from Facebook, would you recommend that students who are interested in nonprofit to get straight into it, or would you recommend them looking at different fields before settling on nonprofit? I think that's really up to you, but if you're interested in nonprofit, I think that it would be worth jumping right in. Obviously, internships can be kind of hard because some places pay for them, some places don't. But I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that. I think it's up to you. But I think if you have interest in nonprofit, you should just go for it, because nonprofit work is really great, and you never know when that internship's going to transition into full-time work. But I think also it's important to keep your scope wide when you're looking at nonprofits, and really ask yourself what you want to do in nonprofit. Do you want to be in the marketing side, or do you want to be in the fundraising side, or do you want to be in the programming side, helping put on those programs that different nonprofits put on, and then evaluating what's important to you, because every nonprofit serves a different set of individuals. I really like United Way because we serve children and families. So we kind of are serving a whole range of people, but some nonprofits just focus on children, some focus on homelessness. So it just kind of depends on where your interests lie in nonprofit work. But I would suggest going right for it. But I don't see any other questions, so I think that we will go ahead and wrap up. I will just leave you with one more piece of advice, and that is to just go back to, sometimes in order to move forward for yourself, you have to leave a job that you like, just because you've got to continue to make steps in your career. And if the current position is not offering that to you, just don't be afraid to take a leap. And if you lack experience, find ways to get that experience in other ways. I joined a couple of boards to get the experience that I needed to move into a new position. So keep yourself open to opportunities. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much again for coming today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.